ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and the EU Commissioner for Housing and Energy, Dan Jørgensen. Please.
Thank you for being here. Thank you both. It is a great pleasure to have you both here. We're talking about climate change and pollution. Yes, climate change, it's affecting us all. Here in Europe, we've had our first heat wave of the year in May, real early. London, 36 degrees centigrade, unheard of. Let me start with you, Governor Walz. You're the governor of Minnesota. Minnesota is affected by climate change. What is your answer to that? What is the Minnesota approach?
Yeah, well, thank you. And Governor Schwarzenegger, thank you for your leadership. Vice President Harris, always good to see you. And Mr. President and Chancellor, it warms my soul to see national leaders speak with such clarity, such vision, such compassion. I don't get to hear that a lot at home right now, so it was wonderful to see that. And the Commissioner and I were just speaking. Has anybody ever had to follow Arnold Schwarzenegger, Kamala Harris, and the Pope onto the stage? So, and I remind all of you who are, you saw what America looks like, those 2/3 from Kamala Harris. I remind everyone the Pope is American too right now, so there is hope. Yes, it is impacting all of us, and Governor Schwarzenegger is making very clear the action lies with all of us. Nobody's going to ride in and save us, but the states in the United States have immense autonomy to make their own decisions, the subnational along with cities. We, Minnesota, are still part of the Paris agreements. We believe in the Kyoto Accords. We followed California's lead, and we're going to reach 100% renewable. Our goal was 2040. We'll reach it by 2035. As my time, we're going to get there. And as Vice President Harris said, it's not only the right thing to do, our energy is cheaper and we're growing our economy because of it, but the impacts. And I just tell you this, Minnesota, you maybe have learned something about us. We've kind of been at the center of things, and I will be as diplomatic as possible. The current administration in the United States doesn't care much for Minnesota, and I honestly disagree with pretty much everything they do. But what we still have is it's not just disagreement. We have the authority to make an impact. And the reason we have to do that, last summer, due to the Canadian wildfires that were burning, there were several days in the state of Minnesota that the worst air quality in the world, worse than Delhi, worse than Beijing, was in northern Minnesota, in one of the most pristine environmental areas in the world, experienced that. So everything we do, I, as governor, had to issue warnings to tell our children to stay indoors. They could not go outside. So the impact is immense. The impact is real. And as Governor Schwarzenegger said, Republican, Democrat, Green, whatever it may be, parents are concerned when their children can't go outside. So we make those decisions because you can't escape the impact. And while there are folks that think those borders are going to stop that pollution from coming across, it didn't really care that it was Canadian wildfires. It became our issue too, and I think that's the way it has to be approached. Minnesota was the place where a man named Norman Borlaug came from, the father of the Green Revolution. We produce and are a top 5 leader in agricultural production. We're seeing massive changes in the production in the season. We're seeing more invasive species coming in. And Minnesota is a place where we have 20% of the world's fresh water. Lake Superior contains so much of that. All of those things are being at threat if we don't address those. And I would just say, you're seeing a sense of, in this current conflict, coming home to people much clearer that we are globally connected on this issue.
Europe is trying to become independent in a lot of different ways, also energy-wise. What is your plan? How are we doing it? How are we in Europe doing it?
Yeah, so I've worked with these issues also for a few decades, and I very much agree with Governor Schwarzenegger in saying that we used to speak about this as purely a climate change issue. Now, actually, that narrative has changed. For me, fighting climate change is still our main objective, and I guess that is fortunately still the case for most decision makers in Europe. But actually, what makes a difference right now, and the reason why we're able to make some very decisive decisions right now, is that the narrative is also now about security. So for us, having faced and being in the middle of threats from Russia, we know that being dependent on Russian gas is not a sustainable place to be. And in 22, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened, I served as Minister for Climate and Energy in Denmark at that time, and I can tell you that we spent the first weeks, day and night, preparing emergency plans for what we would do if Putin turned off the gas to us. And we would have had to force companies to close down. We would have sent people in uniform to close them down. And we were not even half as exposed as, for instance, Germany. So we found out, this was a wake-up call, that being dependent for something so essential as our energy is simply not good for our security. So right now, we're moving fast forward. We're deploying record numbers every year of new renewables. The year before last, it was 78 gigawatts. Last year, it was 89 gigawatts. This year, we'll break that record again. And 1 gigawatt can deliver electricity for 1 million homes. We are on the right track, but I also have to be honest and say it's not going fast enough. So there was a bit of a confusion. Is this a sprint or a marathon? Well, I think the answer is we have to sprint a marathon. Because we need to move fast. And Governor Schwarzenegger also talked about permitting. That's one of the biggest challenges here in Europe also. Not for bad reasons. Kamala Harris also talked about the bureaucracy, and I agree. It can slow down progress. The reason why the rules were made in the first place were often good, valid. It was to protect our environment. But we also need to acknowledge that there will be no environment to protect if we don't fight climate change. So we need to think new ways. We need to still protect, of course, our nature and our environment, but we do need to act much faster.
What is your relationship, climate-wise or pollution-wise, with the Trump administration?
Yeah, and this is very interesting, and Governor Schwarzenegger would clearly understand this. The Republican Party, and I say that in the historical aspect that adds so much to America, we're very much about states' rights, and our federal system leaned heavily towards states having the autonomy. Just to be clear, when you hear about the midterm elections, states run elections, period. It's constitutionally guaranteed. You're seeing that challenged right now. When it comes to climate change, look, there are headwinds. The federal government's canceling offshore wind projects and things like that. But they're trying to sell you Orwell's 2 + 2 is 5. Our business community understands that we need to move forward. They know it's inevitable. This isn't just a nice thing to have. We need to move to renewables. Just like the commissioner was saying, we recognize that none of our wind in Minnesota, none of the 98% of the energy we're getting from renewables goes through the Strait of Hormuz. That is a good thing. So we made policies. We set the climate goals. We set every decision we make in Minnesota goes through a climate action framework. We do not build roads without going through that. And I agree with Kamala Harris on this one. When we do that, we slow things down sometimes. We get too stuck in the minutia of permitting, but we have the ability to do that. States are moving forward on it. There are states across this, and California leads, and we follow them. We followed California's clean car initiatives, meaning now instead of 5 models of renewable EVs being sold in Minnesota, we can get all of them because we set that as a tone. The market is dictating that. And so while the administration may try and push back, we may not get the grants that the Biden-Harris administration gave us that made a huge difference. The private sector is still investing. And again, if you want to build those data centers, you need to do it with clean energy. You need to do it where you can protect the waters. Minnesota's going through this too. So states have immense power to do this. States are the drivers of this, and this is the tension you're seeing in America. It's federal government versus the states, but on this issue of climate pollution reduction, they can say, we've reduced this and we don't care about climate. Doesn't change one thing in Minnesota. We drive forward, we're going on, businesses are doing it. So that's the hopeful side of this. And I think the example of Texas, people think of Texas as a conservative bastion, they're building.
Let's talk about Europe again. By 2050, Europe wants to be climate neutral. But there are also some countries in Europe, some of the 27, they are not as easy to convince of that or to persuade. How do we achieve our common goal?
Well, that is of course true. We have different views on this in different member states. I will say though that this is changing, exactly for the reason I mentioned before. Because even if you don't believe climate change is the most important challenge that we have, which I do, but even if you don't, still, it's really not sustainable to keep being dependent on outside energy sources like fossil fuel. Right now, because of the crisis in the Middle East, we pay in Europe 645 million euros extra for our energy. Not per week, per day. Wow. We don't get one single molecule more. So, the answer for us is more homegrown energy, and that is renewables. So there's two factors that decide how cheap energy is in Europe. We always say that we pay 2 to 3 times more for our energy in Europe compared to, for instance, China. But that's actually not a very accurate way of depicting it, because that's an average number and nobody pays the average. Fact of the matter is, some countries in Europe have very low prices, others quite expensive prices. And the two factors that determine this is, 1, how much renewable have you got? 2, how connected are you to your neighbors? Because having a grid, like Vice President Harris talked about, having a grid that is actually well-functioning, that's capable of giving the flexibility that you need when you do have renewables in your system, is essential. So that's what we're working very hard on getting right now. And I do think we will succeed. We're negotiating a new grids package right now. We, from the Commission side, have proposed to increase 5 times our budget for supporting interconnectors between countries. And when we do this, we will be much better situated to actually support this rollout.
Where do you see yourself, ourselves, in 5 years from now?
I'm with the governors. I'm with the Vice President. This is going to happen. It's inevitable. We are unstoppable in this. I think we're going to get there. It has been slowed down. When we had a little confusion on this, said that this is a marathon, not a sprint. It is a sprint marathon, because we're going to have to go full speed, full time at this. And I see us getting a chance to get there. We're going to have to do it together. I'm going to make my plug for this. I don't come around talking about America first. I talk about democracy first, human rights first, science first, allies first, the people who care about this. We're going to have to figure out how to work together. And this, just to be clear, I'll say this as a Minnesotan. Thank you for all the support the people of Minnesota received over the winter as you see things happen. We see the value, and I'm incredibly grateful for the European Union and the vision they take and the work they do together. Those are models that many of us in many of our states follow along with you. So I see a hopefulness. I was a public school teacher, and I supervised the lunchroom for 20 years. I am an optimist. I am an optimist. If you get through those days, you can get through anything. We will get there. We will get there. It may get worse before it gets better, but it is inevitable we get there. We have to.
I really love that. I was reminded when there was a small clip with Martin Luther King. He didn't start a civil rights movement by giving a speech calling, "I have a nightmare," right? He spoke about hope and dreams and how the world can change. And I do believe that we need to stay on that course. And I do believe that looking at the facts, yeah, there are some very, very disturbing facts of what's actually happening with our climate and our planet. And that is reason for nightmares. But on the other hand, we are selling more electric vehicles than combustion engine vehicles now in Germany. Who would have ever thought? We are seeing how young people are starting to eat more vegetables and less meat to save the climate. We're seeing how our energy systems are transforming fast and not delivering more expensive energy, but cheaper energy for people. So we can do these things, and we will do these things.